Russia has continued its bombardment of residential areas in many Ukrainian cities. Ukrainian emergency services say that a Russian airstrike on a block of flats in Kiev has killed one person. Several others were wounded. Daily bombardments on the outskirts of the capital have reportedly killed dozens more in what seems to be an attempt by Russian forces to cut off supplies. Meanwhile, people who managed to get out of the southern city of Mariúpol have described desperate scenes as a result of the Russian siege. They talk of shops and pharmacies looted, food and water running out. A column of private cars fled the city after Russia shelled an agreed evacuation corridor. Millions of Ukrainians are escaping to neighbouring countries. According to the Polish border guard agency, more than 1.75 million people have arrived since the war began. About 1 million are still there, and Polish officials say the country is now struggling to cope. And the fourth round of peace talks between Moscow and Kiev have now started. Ukraine has hinted at some progress. The deputy head of office for President Zelensky says he believes that Moscow's position is more constructive now than previously. A Russian delegate has also said draft agreements could be reached. It's not clear, though, what areas these would cover. Tim Muffet has the latest for us.
An apartment block in Kiev. Attacked this morning. And in the northern suburbs of the capital, authorities say an aircraft manufacturing plant was also shelled by Russian forces. These attacks follow the sustained bombardment of other cities, such as Mariúpol. Before and after satellite footage shows the devastating impact on residential areas. Following an attack on a maternity hospital in the city, a woman was seen being carried away on a stretcher. This morning there are reports that both she and her child have died from their injuries. A situation described by the Red Cross as a waking nightmare.
People are running out of water, people are running out of food, people are running out of medicine, and every day they have to scramble to find something to survive on. The solution needs to be found in order to protect the civilians, in order to allow them safe passage for those who want to leave the city, or for humanitarian supplies to come in.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been a visible presence in Kiev every day. More talks with Russia will take place today. Ukrainian officials said this morning that Moscow's position was more constructive than it had been previously. The Ukrainian president also demanded a meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Representatives of our country's delegations speak by video link every day. Our delegation has a clear task: to ensure a meeting of the presidents, the meeting that I'm sure people are waiting for. Obviously, this is difficult, a hard path, but this path is needed, and our goal is for Ukraine to get the necessary result in this struggle, in this negotiation.
But this strike on a military training base a few miles from the Polish border yesterday, which killed 35 people, was seen by many as a significant escalation. And there are other stark reminders of the ongoing devastation across Ukraine. This is what's left of a kindergarten in the northeastern city of Kharkiv. In Chernihiv, a delicate removal operation to remove an unexploded device. In Kiev, Irina's piano survived an airstrike.
Day 19 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let's see what sort of advances have been made by the Russians and see how well those Ukrainian defences are holding up. Lending us his military expertise is Air Marshal Edward Stringer.
Good afternoon.
Ed, talk us through the developments of the last 24 hours. What are the key areas we have to look at now?
Well, I think what's being gradually revealed here is Russia's plan B. If we look into the southern region, this is where Russia has been most militarily successful in its long-standing aim to link Russia through the Donbass into Crimea. Though you will note that Mariúpol is still holding out, and we've seen those terrible scenes of the city being bombarded. That might be why Odesa has not yet been progressed by the Russians. This is the dog that hasn't barked. And though we see the probings, it would appear that Russia can't assemble a force to take what is an obvious prize. If we come up to the east, similarly, we see probings here that would cut off this pocket where you've marked up Ukrainian forces. Clearly a sensible military thing to do, but the Russians appear able to assemble a force that could complete it. And then if we come up into the north, around Kiev, we see activity on those thrusts that you've got up there from the north and from the east. But we've seen no actual offensive action into Kiev over the last 3 days.
We have seen residential targets hit by the Russians there. Can we read anything into that?
Yes, and this is that other part of Plan B, unfortunately. As we have been saying, the likely next move, if they haven't got the forces that can actually seize and take these cities, is to surround them, bombard them, and put pressure through the population, through terrorising the population, on Zelensky to force him to negotiate and give Russia something for this military adventurism. And
can you lend us your analysis of what might have happened over the weekend in Yavoriv? The Russian missiles falling so close to a NATO border. What does that mean?
Well, if our assessment of Plan B is correct, and there's all these areas the Russian forces are having to reset, resupply and recock, they're in a race with the very successful Ukrainian armed forces, who are similarly trying to resupply. So what Russia is trying to do here is send a message out there at Yavoriv. It's saying to the West, don't think about resupplying the Ukrainian forces.
Yeah, OK, thank you very much.
Russian soldiers abandoned their military equipment in Ukraine. Dozens of pieces of military equipment with strange signs were found abandoned on the territory of Ukraine. Dozens of units of various kinds of military equipment and weapons were abandoned on the territory of Ukraine. This is evidenced by numerous photographs on the web, in which you can see armored personnel carriers, army trucks, anti-aircraft missile systems, and even heavy tanks. On all the combat vehicles discovered, there are no generally accepted insignia and tactical numbers. However, there are other signs, the nature of which is unknown. On the presented pictures you can see an army truck, the Panzer S anti-aircraft missile and gun system, tanks, armored personnel carriers, etc. Almost all of the detected equipment has ammunition, and the ammunition is either partially used up or not used up at all. Notable is the fact that in the vast majority of cases, the equipment does not have any visual damage, which raises even more questions as to who exactly it could belong to. Experts do not exclude that the equipment could have been abandoned on purpose. However, at the moment this is nothing more than a guess, since there is no official data on this.
As the West and its allies step up sanctions on Russia, US officials say Moscow has reached out to China for military and economic support. That's prompted a warning from Washington, with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan saying China will face harsh consequences if it helps Russia evade the effects of the global sanctions. China's foreign ministry has denied receiving any requests from Moscow. The issue is likely to feature in talks between US and Chinese officials today in Rome. Dr. Ruth Diamond is a senior lecturer in post-Soviet security at the Department of War Studies at King's College London. She joins me now. Dr. Diamond, thanks for your time this morning. If Russia has indeed asked China for help, what does that say about the state of Russia's military capacity?
Well, it doesn't say anything good about it. And, you know, I don't think that Russia would be in the position of asking China for military assistance if it thought that it was fighting this war effectively on its own. And of course, we also need to see that in the context of reports that Russia is attempting to recruit mercenaries from countries like Libya, that it's said that it's going to bring thousands of soldiers over from Syria. All of these together are signs that I think the Russian war is in significant trouble. The Russian armed forces are failing to a large extent.
Now, what would happen? I mean, let's say China were to assist, if indeed they have been asked, but say they accept that offer, what consequences might they face?
It's not really clear at this point, not least, I guess, because the Americans and other Western countries are presumably in fairly intensive dialogue with the Chinese government over this. But the government of the US has been clear that there would be significant consequences, and obviously that would have an impact, presumably, on China's very significant economic relationship with the US.
What is China's wider position in all of this?
It's not entirely clear, I have to say. I mean, the Chinese government has been broadly supportive of Russia here. In what it's said in public spaces, but ultimately, I guess the question is, what's in it for China, right? What is the incentive for China to get dragged into this conflict, which would have such significant repercussions for its key relationships with Western states? And it's not clear to me at this point that there's an obvious rationale for China to get involved in the way that Russia seems to want it to.
But they're likely to be watching on at this conflict very closely.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, everybody is. And this is a conflict that has a potential, of course, to spread if the countries involved, if Russia and NATO states are not careful. It obviously has very significant economic implications for Russia and for Western states. So in a globalized economy, in a global world, this is a conflict that's going to be very significant for China as well.
There's been much talk about this, but are we witnessing, in your opinion, a major shift in the geopolitical world order?
There have been shifts underway for some time now. Certainly, I think this is the view, I have to say, of the Russian government, which has wanted a significant shift. I think much will depend on the outcome of the conflict. Ironically, actually, one thing that we're seeing is a significant shift in the European security order, which, of course, is what Putin said he wanted. He's just not getting the change that he asked for, because what we're seeing, in fact, I think, is a strengthening of Western institutions and Western alliances. So perhaps in some ways things are changing, but not in the way that Russia anticipated.